Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So I have a little bit of a discussion video for you guys today. I guess I was thinking about reviews and what is their purpose? Like, why do we do them? What are they there for? I guess the reason I've been thinking about this is because I do weekly reviews, right? Like, I do my Project Poirot right now, so every single week I have a review of a book up for you guys. And I've also started doing my yay or nay reviews, sort of as like bonus videos. And I guess I just have been sort of wondering, like, why do we, like, what is it that I want out of a book review? What is it that I think other people might want out of a book review? And why do we bother doing them? Because as everybody on BookTube talks about, like, always those videos get fewer views. Like, always. People, like, I'd say it's about 50% for me. So sometimes I wonder, like, if I was reviewing more like popular or front list videos, would those get more views? But then I hear from other people who do those that they don't necessarily. So anyway, all that to say, I've seen a few people, like, there's always some videos kind of like this circulating around BookTube, like, what are reviews for? Like, why does nobody watch them? I don't really want to, like, bellyache about why people do or don't watch them. Like, we all have our preferences, whatever. And, like, I think for myself, I tend to prefer, like, I like watching book reviews for either books I've read or books that I'm interested in reading. And if I'm neither of those, then, like, that's not going to necessarily be a video that I watch from someone, even if I like their channel, for the most part. Like, sometimes I'll still watch a review if I just really like that reviewer. But, so, you know, I don't really care if, that sounds bad, but, like, I don't really care if people watch them or don't, in terms of, like, I'm not judging anyone for it. But all that to say, I was just sort of like reflecting on what are the sort of 5 types of reviews that I either make or have encountered, and just thought I would put this out there as like another layer to the discussion of like what I think various book reviews are for and like why do we even do them. So I would say for me, the first and foremost reason that I make book reviews, or that I've ever, you know, left a review on Goodreads or whatever, is for my own personal record. So, like, I like, now that I'm by the end of Project Poirot, I will have essentially like a video diary of my thoughts of the entire Poirot oeuvre. I think that that's cool. Like, I will be interested, you know, in 20 years from now, because I imagine that I will still be rereading Poirot 20 years from now. I would love to come back and see what 30-year-old me thought about Poirot, and like have my opinions changed, and like what was I thinking about at the time, and all that kind of stuff. Like, I love encountering old reviews that I wrote on Goodreads or wherever, or on a blog or whatever, and seeing what past me thought about a book, because it's interesting if my thoughts haven't changed, and it's interesting if my thoughts have. So, like, that, you know, that's the reason why I keep like nerdy, copious spreadsheets of like exactly what my ratings for books are. I mean, like, it's for my own edification first and foremost. So, like, I guess that's a discussion point of like, two fellow booktubers, do you like, is that something that's important to you? Like, are you primarily making the review for yourself? Because if you're not, I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad, but like, it's food for thought. Like, if you don't enjoy the reviews, then why would anybody else? Just something to think about. So the first and foremost reason I do them is for myself, for a personal record, to record my thoughts and for me to have like as reference. The second kind of type of review, which I don't think I've really done that yet on this channel, and I don't know that I ever will, just because it's not something that I necessarily am interested in doing, is to provide a relatively objective assessment of a book. Now, I do my yay or nay reviews, but I think that actually falls into the 5th category that I'll talk about. But I think that a huge portion of why book reviews exist, like for instance in something like the New York Times, is to provide a relatively objective assessment. Now, nothing is ever objective, right? I mean, you can get into like reader response theory and all that stuff. I'm not even going there. I'm just saying that, like, there is always going to be, if a book is universally loved, it's impossible. Like, there's always going to be somebody who's like, that was a shit book that should never have been published, and I weep for the trees that died to make it. Like, there's always going to be that person. And conversely, there's all, you know, for every trash fire, dumpster fire of a book, there's going to be one person who's like, loved it. Favorite book ever. I have a hardback, like 10 hardback signed copies. It's my favorite, right? So, like, of course nothing is ever completely objective, but you think of something like The Guardian or the New York Times or the Washington Post or whoever as providing like overall a relatively objective assessment. This is also like something that you would get from maybe like literary studies or like literature professors, whoever, where it's like, okay, here's as objectively as we can, like here are the merits of this book, here are the like cons of this book. And I think that that is really important for readers. Like I appreciate having somebody who is trying to remove their own emotional response from the text saying like, okay, look, this is a very well-written book. The characterization is good. The plot is well-developed. The, genre conventions are played with and are adhered to or not adhered to in these following ways. I think that there is value in those. I just think that for the medium of YouTube and BookTube, I don't know that those are very interesting assessments for the most part, right? Like, I think they have their usefulness, but I think what we come to BookTube and YouTube for in general is to get the subjective piece of reviewing. Like that's what's interesting to me, at least, in reviewers, is like the more I get to know somebody and their reviewing style, the more I can understand, like I can contextualize their subjective responses to given books. And I like that. Like that's the fun to me of watching individuals do reviews, as opposed to going to something more objective like the New York Times or whatever. So all that to say, I think the second type of review that you have is like a relatively objective assessment of a book, and I just think that that is probably what we see maybe least of on BookTube, and for good reason, because I just don't know that it's that engaging. It's more like purely informative and less interesting, at least to me. The third kind of grouping, I will say, or the third type of review that I kind of thought of was a kind of like a discussion type review. And I would say that this plus the fourth category are really what my Poirot reviews try to be. And what I mean by book club discussion is that I think in those types of reviews, you're getting into some of like the thematic stuff, you're getting into some things that you personally did or didn't like about a book, you're talking about your own response to it, you're talking about what you think other people might think of various things, or questions that made you ask, or just, it's more of like kind of a response, maybe is the way to say that, but it's the type of discussion I would expect. Like when I do my Project Poirot videos, one of the main things that I'm wanting to like get across is if you have never, like if you've read this book and you've never encountered somebody else who ever read it, but you wanted to talk about it, like here I am, here's an opportunity for you to talk to me about it. Do you know what I mean? Like I want them to be somewhat chatty. I want them to kind of evoke what I like to see in like book clubs I've been in that were like well functioning. I try to kind of have that atmosphere, and this is probably my favorite version of reviews on BookTube. Like I really like videos where people are getting into like really like responding to the book and not just giving you a synopsis. And that is something, I didn't put that as a category. That's something I really don't like that I see a lot of on BookTube, is people talk about like their review of something is here's a synopsis and oh, I liked it, or it was okay, or whatever. That to me is not really much of a review. I think what they're wanting to do is what I'm talking about, is sort of like talk about their response, but they get so caught up in just telling you what happened that they never get to that response. And to me, this is one of the things that BookTube does best, is these sort of like discussion-y type reviews and getting into somebody's subjective experience and inviting you to kind of like talk back to them about that experience. Like that I think is what BookTube has a lot of, and for good reason, because I think it tends to be like one of the more effective review styles for this format. The fourth category I kind of came up with was critique. So like where you're not necessarily like, this is kind of an offshoot of the book club version, but I think it's a little bit different. And this is something, again, I think kind of formal review publications straddle the line between the objective assessment and then also critique. And this is something that I try to incorporate into my Poirot reviews, for instance, where you're not just talking about your own response to it, but you're also trying to think at least somewhat objectively and kind of give an actual critique of the book and say like, here, like this, the writer was doing X, Y, and Z. This is what they were trying to do. It wasn't done well, and here's why I think it wasn't done well. So it's almost like the most objective version of a subjective opinion, if that makes any sense. So like, for example, Taken at the Flood. I did not like that book. So when I did my review of it for Poirot, I talked about like I kind of started by doing sort of my like book club version of talking about like why I didn't like it and like my personal response to it. But then I tried to take a step back and do more of what I would call a critique, which was saying like, here's what I think Christie was trying to do and here's why I don't think she did it very well. And again, I guess that could kind of go into like objective assessment, but I think I'm talking like, I think there's a level of self-awareness in a critique that it is coming from a personal place, and it is not necessarily trying to generalize that as like an overall opinion the way that an objective assessment is. I don't know, maybe those all kind of blend together. The more I'm talking this through, the more they're starting to blend a little more in my mind. But I do think that there's a slight difference between somebody sort of like objectively assessing a book as much as they possibly can and giving a critique of it. And I try to do that somewhat in my Poirot reviews. Usually this kind of second half of the review tends to be more of a critique. So I don't know. You can let me know if you think I'm making too fine of a distinction there. But to me, that was sort of like the fourth category. And, you know, I should say also just that I think this fourth category of critique is not something that I see a lot of on BookTube, and I wish I saw more of. I wish people were willing to get into, not just in like unpopular opinion videos or worst of the year or whatever. I wish people were willing to be critical of books that they liked more in reviews. Like, I wish that they would really get into the nitty gritty of like, okay, I really like this book, but here's this thing, or like, here's this one aspect of it, and I really want to dissect this and talk about like what did and didn't work about it. I wish that there was more like kind of higher level critiques on BookTube. Like, I wish people would go there a little bit more. I'm not saying nobody does, by no means. I just wish it was something that was more popular and that more people would do. And then the fifth category, again, like the more I'm talking about this, the more I'm seeing how many, like, I think that these different kind of aspects of book reviews tend to pop up in one review often, but to me they're kind of like distinct parts. So anyway, the last kind of type of book review I think is recommendations. So sometimes this is as straightforward as like a recommendation list. That's in essence a very short book review, right? So if you have a list of like top 5 books for people who loved Game of Thrones, right? You're implicitly recommending these books to somebody, so you're implicitly like reviewing them. You're saying like, I think that they are worth your time in some degree, and I think that if you like this, you will like this. I think that those essentially are sort of like very abbreviated, shortened reviews. And then I also, this is to me kind of what my yay or nay review series is. I think it's somewhere between that and an objective assessment, but basically saying like, do I think that this is worth your time, yay or nay? It's like basically a recommendation review. So it's not just my own experience. It's like me taking my experience and then extrapolating it out onto a theoretical person and saying, here's who I think this book would or wouldn't work for. And again, I think that all of these tend to kind of, the more I talk about this, I realize that they kind of interweave together. But anyway, that was the fifth category of types of elements of book reviews, I guess you could say. So anyway, when I was thinking about all this, I guess the reason I wanted to come up with these sort of like categories, and now that I've talked this through, I think what I want to say is these are sort of elements of book reviews that I think can get combined in various ways. I guess like I just wanted to put this out there because I've been reflecting on like, why am I even doing reviews? I do think that they're important to do for some reason, and I think for me the most important reason is, like I said at the beginning, like a personal record. Like I want to be able to have a record of what I thought of a book, and to me that's the most important reason to do them. But I do also think that as you're watching various channels, one of the best ways to get to know people that you're watching is to watch their reviews of books that you've also read, because it gives you the opportunity to sort of like compare your reading tastes. And I'm not saying that if you don't have the same reading taste, then you automatically won't like that booktuber, but it gives you like kind of a point of reference as to how to take their recommendations and how to engage with them as a reviewer, and to engage with their tastes. I just think that it's very hard to get around the idea that if somebody never produces recommendations, if somebody never like gives you actual opinions about what they're reading, it's hard to really connect with them as a fellow reader, I think. So that's why I do think that it can get a little I'll just speak from my own experience. When I'm watching channels that have sort of devolved into a lot of hauls and unboxings and like, I don't know, just sort of like very shallow book reviews. So maybe they do like monthly wrap-ups, but that's it. I do think that I tend to lose interest because part of what gives people their personality as a reader is for me to know what they're reading and how they're reacting to it. So I guess as I'm processing this, my sort of feeling is this is something that's important to me as a viewer, even if I don't watch every single review someone does. It's important to me that somebody is consistently talking and reflecting about the books that they're reading, or else it's hard for me to connect with them as a fellow reader, if that makes any sense. So anyway, that was sort of, we'll see how I edit this together. I hope that that made some kind of sense, but I guess I was just sort of ruminating on why do we even do book reviews and trying to kind of organize it in my mind. And I do think that those kind of like figuring out that I think that those 5 elements are kind of what I come to book reviews for was helpful for me, at least, to kind of dissect like what is it that I'm trying to do and what is it that I want other people to do. If I was in charge of you, what would I have you do? So anyway, if you have any thoughts about this, definitely let me know. Like I said, this is a discussion, so feel free to respond. You know, always keep things civil, but I enjoy discussion. So yeah, I'm kind of opening this up to you guys. Let me know what you thought below. If you enjoyed this video, or at least had some response to this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that will do it. I hope you guys are having a really wonderful day, and I will just talk to you soon.